It's time to dad.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Time to Dad. You're joining us tonight for one of our specialist episodes. Around every month, we try to bring you guys some cool content. It's a little less of us dicking around and making fun of each other, and it's a little more serious conversation. It's a little more focused on a specialty that we think as dads and men that you guys should know about. So tonight's specialist episode, Joe was happy to introduce us to Sergio here. Sergio's background is in mortgages. So thank you guys for joining us and hanging out with us. But without further ado, Sergio, if you don't mind, just kind of introducing yourself to the listeners on the podcast, giving them a little bit of background.
Hey, man, no problem. And listen, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Definitely a pleasure. Always a pleasure. But so I've been in the industry doing mortgage finance for about 20 years now. And, seen a lot of ups and downs. And, my bread and butter is mostly residential stuff, like, regular purchases and refinancing, things like that. We do go into the realm sometimes of like mixed use and stuff like that, but more geared towards helping people get into homes and saving money on refis or, things like that. But yeah, man, definitely well-rounded. We do all kinds of stuff like helping first-time investors or, there's a 10-time investor, but pretty much lending money for houses.
Nice.
Is my expertise.
All right. So a lot of people hop on here and listen to the first couple of seconds and then hop off. So I'm gonna hit you with a let me get your top 3 pieces of mortgage advice for anybody that may pop on and then pop off. What if you could only tell our listeners 3 things right now? What do you think they'd be?
It'd be when you're house hunting, don't go with family. Try to go with just maybe you and your wife. Don't break the mom and the cousins, and just makes your life a living hell. I would say, as far as a lot of people talk about rates. There's really no perfect time to buy. It's really what fits your budget. And I would say the third thing is work on the credit. A lot of people want to get a car 3 or 4 months before they go to buy a house, stuff like that, or start running up credit cards. So I would say that those are the most important, the first things I would say. Obviously, you got to have a job and money saved. That goes without saying. But
yeah,
the credit is something hardest to work on.
Yeah, no. So I like for anybody, you can peek behind the curtain here. But when we do these special episodes, we kind of meet. All of our other episodes are recorded just shooting from the hip. But for these episodes specifically, we kind of meet with the specialists. We kind of get a little bit of a game plan together. So we make sure we're bringing you guys good content. But Sergio, when you met with Joe and I just wanted you to elaborate just a little bit more on the whole friends and family thing, because when you were talking with Joe and I, and we were kind of just getting to know each other and getting the juices flowing, you went into the details of exactly the headaches and the problems that can cause. If you can just kind of elaborate a little more on that piece. I think you had kind of touched on it ended up costing one of your clients a decent chunk of money because of some probably ill-advised advice that a family member had given them. If you can just elaborate on the pains of getting more people involved in dealing with your money and mortgage than you need to.
Yeah, so that's one of the most, I would say, common things where it kind of causes friction in the process is people will bring, and I was saying before, I get it, obviously you're going to bring your wife, right? Or, if it's a woman, bring your husband, your significant other. But, you have people bringing, their parents and, uncles and cousins or even children, like right now I'm helping a family member out, and he's every time he goes see a house, he brings his kids, and it's like, you know, not to sound like a jerk, but like, you're the one cutting the checks. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, kids are gonna live there. They're gonna live there. Like, they shouldn't really have so much of a say so of what is what. And then, usually when you bring family, the more people you bring, there's always a family member that's an expert at something, and the rooms are too small, or it's always something, man. And it's like everybody's gonna have a gripe about something. And I tell people, I'm like, look, if you're not getting a house new construction and literally picking out everything from countertops to cabinets and flooring, there's always going to be something in the house that you're not going to like, or you kind of feel like you're settling on. And like when I bought my first house, I'm like, I didn't really like the bathroom. But it was by a really good price, and the market was starting to go crazy. And if I would have sat there complaining about the bathroom, or nitpicking everything, it would have been a lot harder to find something. Some of those same people will, I'll speak to them a year later and they still haven't found the house, because of that situation. So I'm like, listen, bring your wife and try to keep it at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't listen to every single thing. I mean, I've heard the most ridiculous things. Oh my God. Like, I had one woman, she was complaining about her kitchen table didn't fit in any house that she was looking at, like any of the kitchen or dining. Like, you're gonna have to find a new table. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she was looking in the Bronx, and in the Bronx, houses are compact, right? Every house, they're like all on top of each other. So it's like, I'm like, has every house you've seen been like this? Yeah. How many you've seen? At least 20, and they all look like that, right? All right, so you got to come to grips with you need a new table.
Yeah.
You need a new kitchen table, downsize. Like, what do who are you inviting over? Like, how big is your table? Seriously. Like,
If she's that picky, probably not too many people are coming over. So.
yeah, seriously. I'm like, what do you got? The royal family coming over? Like, how many people you sitting at a table? Like, sheesh. But yeah, that's a huge thing with the family, is that a lot of, they think they open out, and they're most of the time they're not. They're just making it harder for the buyer.
Okay.
It's interesting. So the third tip you said, right, is something that I feel like is more common, that like a lot of people know, because it's like something that everybody says. But surprisingly, you'll still meet people that's not common, right? But don't get a car. Like, don't mess with the credit right before you're buying a house. Like, don't buy a car 3 months prior. But like, what is the issue besides running credit? Like, if somebody's buying a car, getting a new car, and it's 3-4 months away, had a payment before, they get a new payment. Like, what is the real effect? Like, why doesn't a lender or a bank want somebody to go get a new car 3 months prior, besides messing up their credit by 20 points?
That's a great question. And the first, obviously, whenever you open up an account, your scores drop. So, a lot of people, and vice versa, some people will try to say, hey, I'm paying off this car, and I'm like, they're like, what? That sounds crazy. I'm like, no, because if you're going to pay this car off, that's one less thing on your credit that creditors have to judge you by. So it knocks your score down 30, 40, 50 points. And the same thing when you're opening that loan, it's going to drop their score for the first probably 4 months, 5 months, sometimes even 6 months, depending on how many dealerships you go to have running your credit and stuff. So it's a few things. The inquiries, you're going to have a bunch of hard pulls on the credit that could drop your score. And, let's say you're at a 700 score, right? And you have 4 banks run your credit, and now you're at a 685. You just basically made yourself pay higher in interest. You're going to pay like a quarter, maybe even 0.5% higher in interest. And over the course of even 5 years, it's a lot of money, So another thing is, a lot of people don't know when it comes to financed cars. So if you have 10 or less payments on a car note, we can exclude that payment. So I tell people, I'm like, rather than paying it off, let's say you have 2 years left on the car note, and you don't even have to do it before the process. You could actually do it at the closing. I've done that at the closing, where, if, let's say your car payment's $500 a month. I was gonna say 250, but it's not like that no more. But that was probably
I wish.
7 years ago.
Now we know how long you've actually been doing it. That it was
Yeah.
250.
Yeah. So if you have a $500 payment and you got 2 years, let's say a year and a half left, you pay down where you have 10 payments or less. Now we can exclude that debt rather than most people thinking they have to pay it off to exclude it. Now I'm like, listen, not only are you going to save a couple grand by not paying it off, you're going to save your score. You're not going to drop.
I actually remember you telling me that when I bought my house. I had my Toyota RAV4. So see, Jason should have been on this one. Jason works at Toyota. He would have been happy about that. I had my RAV4 and I had like 6 months left. And I remember you saying, "Oh, that's not included in your like debt to income ratio."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wow, that's cool," because that's like a 400. I think it was like $300 or $400 a month that I paid for the car, and it was not included in that.
Yeah, so you saved yourself a couple grand by not having to pay that off, for sure. And then on the contrary, a lot of people with leases. The only thing about leases is that we can't exclude it ever. They don't even care if you have one payment left because they know at the end of the day you're going to need another car. So even though you pay it off, they know you're not going to just not have a car.
Sure.
It gets a little sticky. I mean, there are ways around it sometimes if you can prove you have multiple cars and show registrations and but I just tell people, listen, it's not a guarantee they're going to exclude it. So if you have a lease, just it is what it is, But if it's a finance, there are ways around it. It's a little easier. But yeah, so that's definitely a big thing, I would say.
So along the lines of not jacking up your credit at the last minute, I feel like another thing that I hear a lot about are people getting shocked when they all of a sudden come up with a down payment and nobody can document where the money came from.
Oh yeah, no mattress money. I tell people.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
I tell them put that mattress money in the bank right away. They're like, but isn't the IRS going to come after me? I'm like, I'm not the IRS. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I don't work for them. But yeah, so, banks will go back 2 months. So I'm not supposed to say this, but technically, they go back 60 days. So if 6 months before you're going to buy a house, let's say you got married and, you got some cash in around from the wedding, I tell people, listen, just put it in the bank right away because the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take to use that money. Because cash deposits, we live in a crazy world these days. It could be anything. I even had a woman once. She put money down on the house, and the deal didn't close. It wasn't her fault, but for whatever reason, I think it was the appraisal or something. And this was prior to her speaking to me, and she got the money back. And like a knucklehead, she cashed the check and had the cash instead of just depositing the check back. She cashed it, had the cash sitting around for like 3 weeks, and then she deposited it. So I know. I mean, look, clearly you could see, right? She wrote the check, the same dollar amount came back to her. But unfortunately, how do we know that's the same money? You know what I mean? She could have done some crazy illegal activities with that money and now, put it back in the bank. We don't know where that money's coming from. So I think it's like within a week, you have to put it back within a few days. So if you went to your bank right now and took out $5,000 and, 3 days later you put back the 5,000, that's going to be okay. But if you wait like usually more than a week, there's no way for them to know it's the same 5,000. So large deposits are, definitely one of the tougher things to get around. So there was another thing I was going to mention about it. Oh, it slipped my mind. Sorry.
It's all good.
It can come back. It might come back.
It will come back. Usually it'll come back. But, it had to do with like the cash, large deposits.
So let me ask this, because I see this stuff on Instagram all the time. And so it's always people talking about HELOCs, Right? I see that all the time. At HELOCs, take the equity, all right? And a lot of people that bought homes in the last, I guess you can say 3, 4, 5 years, right? Maybe longer. Right, their home values have gone up. The real estate market. So a lot of them have equity in their house. When does it make sense? I guess to do a HELOC. Well, first explain what a HELOC is. Right, and what's
I'm lost. I'm like, please tell me what a HELOC is.
Yeah, what does that acronym mean? No, but I remember what the large deposit thing I was going to say was the Oh, it slipped my mind again. I'm not even going to think about it anymore. All right, so home equity line of credit. HELOC stands for home equity line of credit. There's two. It's the second lien on your house. So there's two types. There's a home equity loan and then a home equity line. So a loan is exactly the way it sounds. It's just a one lump sum they give you, right? So you just like you took out a lump sum on your mortgage, a home equity loan is going to be a one lump sum on a second position lien. All right. And then a home equity line is very similar to like a credit card. So, if you get a $20,000 credit line, let's say HELOC, there's called a drawback period. So the lower the drawback period you take, the better the rate will be. So as example, let's say the going rate in a HELOC is 8.5%, right? Because they're usually like 2% higher than the normal rate, right? Because there's a lot more risk that they're taking, and I'll get into that. But so the drawback period is basically if it's just like a credit card. If you have a $20,000 spending limit on a credit card and you run 10,000 of it, right? Now you're gonna have a payment based on that 10,000, right? If you never take from the HELOC, you never have a payment. So that's what a lot of people like about it, and that also there's very little upfront cost and closing costs to it, but there's pros and cons to all of it. You know what I mean? So with the HELOC and the drawback period, you could treat it just like a credit card where you could pay that 10 grand off and now you don't have a payment again. Or you spend 5 of it and then pay back 2,500. Now you only have a payment based on that 2,500. So you could kind of keep paying it down and pulling more out. So if you had that 20,000 and you spend 10, right now you're only available 10,000 limit credit. So you're going to have a payment based on that 10,000. If you pay half of it off, now you only owe 5,000 of it. You're only going to pay on that 5. Exactly. But one of the cool things about the HELOCs is your payment is actually based on the balance, not the original balance. So on a mortgage, if your mortgage payment is $3,000, right, it's never going to change. It can only go up, right? If the taxes go up and the insurance go up. Obviously, if you refinance to get a lower rate, but let's just say you never refinance and never remortgage it. It doesn't matter if you take $100,000 and put it towards that loan, you're still going to pay $1,000 a month, right? Yeah. So with the home equity line of credit, what's cool about it is every month, let's say your monthly obligation is $300 a month, right? So, if you pay extra $100, that's what I always tell people. I'm like, just like on a credit card, don't ever pay the minimum, right? It's going to take you forever. So if you pay extra $100 and you're paying $400, that new payment the following month is going to be based on that less balance. So if, let's say $200 went towards the principal, now that $200 less balance, now your payment's based on that. So, it's a pretty cool tool because, as long as you're accelerating the payments, your payment, even if the rate goes up slightly, your payment's always going to decrease.
Yeah.
Because the
balance is way less than a standard credit card rate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's a lot of cool things online talking about paying your mortgage off super fast and putting everything through home equity line of credit and stuff like that. I mean, I was going to dabble with it at one point, but I just want to learn more about it before I go into that. But
is there an expiration on that, or is it very similar to a credit card in which you have to close the account or become unworthy and the bank closes it?
So if you never use it, I mean, it's just like a credit card. They can close that account if you never use it. But as far as like the period where you can take from it, pay it down, take from it, pay it down, and own nothing, let's say, that's that draw period I was telling you about where, if the going rate's 8.5, that's going to be on the lowest draw period, let's say 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want 5 years to take from it and pay it off, it's going to be slightly higher than that 8.5.
Okay.
And then, 7 years, etc. So, obviously,
what's the longest somebody?
I think 7. I think 7
Okay.
years. It's either 7 or 10. I mean, I've been doing them for maybe 2 years. East Coast Capital, we do the home equity line of credits, and it's a good tool, man, because a lot of people bought in the last 5 years. Their rate is low. They don't want to refinance, and actually, I would say minus the last 2 years because rates have been pretty high. But between 2019 and let's say 2022, rates were super low, so people don't want to, refinance exactly. So they take out the HELOCs, and I'm doing them at least, I would say, once a month, where somebody bought a house 5 years ago and now it's double almost, and now they're like, all right, well, maybe I could buy an investment property now, and it works out. Usually you could take 100,000 from that home and now use that as a 20% down payment on another house or whatever it is. And, if you're going to use it as an investment, most of the time, the rent covers everything. And it's how high rent is right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what a lot of the house flippers do, right? Like they have their house, they get equity in the house, then they take
they leverage it, exactly. And
they
you can
get $100,000 to put down on the next house, and now they carry that, they rent it, bring cash flow in, and if that house then appreciates, that house goes up, they do the same thing. It's
you can leverage them.
Yeah, a little bit tougher in New York where we are, but in other states, I think it's a little bit easier when your taxes aren't $16,000 a year, right?
You can take a HELOC on a rental property?
Yep.
Game changer.
It doesn't have to be a primary residence. It could be an investment property. They're going to lend you less. You're gonna borrow a little less out of it. Does
that affect the interest rate?
Yeah. So let's say on a primary, I could lend you about 80% out of the home between both mortgages. If it's an investment, they'll go to 75, sometimes 70, depending on the overall strength of the. So, a lot of people bought houses, especially out of state. You buy a house in PA 5 years ago for 150. Now that thing's like 300, sometimes even more. And then obviously you got to factor the down payment, the money you've already paid down the loan. So, let's say you only owe 90 grand on that house that's worth 300. Now you could take out 100,000, buy another one, leverage it, and the rent should cover everything. If you do it smart, the rent will cover everything.
Wow.
With just a quick question on the interest rate, you mentioned a couple different numbers. Is there anywhere that's based off of, or do you know if there's anywhere that's based on like interest rate values?
As far as regular mortgages or HELOCs? For
the HELOC specifically, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a formula they use. It's prime plus the margin and the index. You got to add those in. It's a little bit tricky, but there is a formula that they use.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's not as standard as a regular mortgage where the rate is what it is.
Yeah, because I was just thinking like credit cards. I mean, they're all based off this flat rate. Like what you see is like kind of what you get for the interest rate. But I noticed that we were talking about like 8-9%, but it seemed like it was kind of variable. So I was just curious, like if there was like a base value. Like I actually have a HELOC on my house, and it's at like 11%. But I go through Navy Fed, has a 20-year draw period, and then another 20-year period.
Nice, so a 20-year drawback period. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I've seen 10. I haven't seen 20. So there you go. Like a lot of different banks do different things. I've never seen a 20-year drawback period.
Well, and that's the VA thing, like militaries, like they like to ask us for money or like to take money from us for sure. So they're all about it.
Well, thank you for your services, man.
I appreciate it. No, and it's just So with our interest rate, it's based off the Wall Street International, I think is what it's called, and it's based off of the Wall Street interest rate for the HELOC. And so I don't know if it was different based on like, so maybe Fed runs off of a different banking structure, or if it was different. Yeah,
the majority of them do. There's different, different ones they go based off of, but more or less it's going to be kind of around the same. You're not going to see anything crazy of a change. I've seen people's rates even go to like 12, even more on the HELOC. So it obviously depends on credit and equity and things like that. Just like the regular, they're a little more strict on HELOCs because they're a second position lien, and usually, someone's going to lose their house. They're the ones that get screwed over, because the first person that gets paid off is the government. Then the second person that gets paid is the first mortgage, and then whatever's left over from that is the second position lien or the home equity. So they, if someone's getting foreclosed on and they're not getting much for the house, usually that HELOC is the one that gets screwed over. So that's why their rates are much higher. That's why they're a lot more strict on credit scores and things like that. I think you need like a 760 to get the best score versus 740 on regular loan. So a little more strict with things like that. But yeah, for sure. But yeah, home equities are good too if you use them the right way. If you're gonna, just like on a credit card, if you're gonna make the minimum payment forever, it's really not gonna work out for you. It's gonna take you forever to pay that.
Do you think a HELOC is a good solution if you've got major credit card debt you're trying to get out from under that may have like a 18, 20, 22% interest rate?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said before, there's pros and cons to everything. A lot of people get sold on HELOC because, they think, there's no closing costs really. You get the money fast. You could take from it, pay it off, things like that. But, if you don't do it the right way and you're paying that minimum payment and now the rates go up and now you're paying 12% versus on a traditional mortgage, let's say you could have got half that rate, so it just depends on the situation and what the customer is really looking for,
Well, in that case, you mean kind of like putting less down on the pay, like the down payment, so they just keep more cash as opposed to putting more down and taking a HELOC, right? Like it'd be beneficial to keep more, like kind of what is a seller's concession.
Yeah, it's all, it's a very common saying, cash is king, a lot of people, they'll look to put pretty much every dollar they have. If they've saved up 150,000, they're like, yeah, I want to put this all towards the house. And I'm like, listen, my personal opinion, maybe put half of that down. Put, Joe, better than anybody. You could invest that other half of that money and have it gaining interest rather than you put it all into the house and then God forbid something happens and now you need to pull something out. And what if the market goes down, right? And now they're lending you a percentage of the house. So if your house value drops, and it does happen, I mean, it's not happening too much right now, but it does happen. And now they don't even have access to that money because, the house tanked or dropped. And now 80% is much less from what, it was worth, when they bought it. And now they can't take the equity out, so things like that do happen. I've seen it happen. You buy a house for 500, let's say the market goes down to 450, and now, that 80% mark is based on the 450. It makes it tougher to pull money out, So.
So speaking of the market, I think it's a hot topic right about now is with the fluctuation in both home prices and interest rates. Any advice or do's or don'ts for those people that are, trying to wait for the next housing crisis or wait for rates to drop or home prices to drop? I feel like people think there's a way to get ahead in that, but I feel like at some point you just gotta jump in.
Like I was saying before, there's no perfect time, man. Yeah, it's when if the payment fits your budget, you know, I tell people you're not putting an interest rate on your check, right? When you cut the check mortgage. So like, you know, if the payment fits your budget, that's what you should be most concerned about, you know. And a lot of people, I mean, if you're banking on the market and the economy collapsing just so you can get a cheaper house, there's a good chance you're not going to have a job. So pay that mortgage. You know what I mean? Like, so.
I remember going through that.
Well, and
yeah, I mean,
well, and
it's just like during, you know, I'm showing my age here, but you know, when the market tanked in '08, you know,
when I bought my first house, almost.
I was doing more of foreclosure bailouts and modifications because it was easier to help someone save their house than people getting loans because everybody was losing their jobs and hours were getting cut, you know, stuff like that, you know, or if it's a married couple and one of them lose their job, now it's just everything's on the one, you know, person. So, you know, you should definitely not bank on the market crashing to get a cheaper house. Because, you know, I do pre-approvals where I'll hear from somebody from like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and they're still waiting. I'm like, dude, you know, you that house 4 years ago was 450, right?
Yeah.
And now it's 600. Yeah, keep banking on that. By the time, you know, you're never gonna get a house, or you're gonna come to grips with the fact that you're paying way more now because you wanted to be stubborn and wait, not take people's advice. People think that you're being like like salesy, you know, like trying to sell them on something. Oh, jump on it now and push it. I'm like, no, listen, I don't care when you buy a house, but you know, your bank account's gonna care. When you got to cut a check for, you know, an extra $1,000 a month. I had a guy 10 years ago, right? I know it sounds crazy, but he was, you know, he was a veteran. He is a veteran, and you know, he could have done zero down. House is no lie. When he was trying, this was like 2013, so it was more than 10 years ago. You know, he could have bought a house in Long Island. I think, you know, in Patchogue, maybe around Concomar for like three and a quarter, you know, and now it's 650 for the same house. So his payment back then would have been 2,200, and now it's 4,400. You know, so it's like, I know that's a little extreme, 10 years, but just showing you.
It's not though. Like I have a coworker who, like right before that big surge in house pricing and the interest rates skyrocketed, you know, him and his wife got discouraged about like all the bidding wars on houses and the house prices. And now he's like, you know, I ask him every once in a while, I'm like, hey man, like, are you guys back on the market? Like, what are you looking to do? And every time we go back to like, damn, like should have just, you know, knuckled up and bought a house back then. Cause the house back then they could have bought for, you know, 225,000 is selling now for 450, if not more around here. And he's like, shit, dude, like, I don't know when the fuck we're going to get back in the market. And rent's not getting any cheaper either. So
damn near double. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and
I don't know how people, I mean, you want to talk about a real problem. How the fuck are people paying like twice the cost of a typical mortgage and rent? Blows my mind.
Yeah, man. You know, on Long Island, a lot of people are buying houses with legal accessory units. You know, they call them. So if like somebody converted a garage, an attic, or a basement, you know, they'll rent it out. And that's what I tell them. I'm like, look, if you don't want to pay $5,000 a month, you know, find something with a legal accessory unit where, let's say you're getting $1,500 a month in rent. I mean, I even did it myself too. You know, I'm not gonna lie. When I bought my first house, it came with a finished basement, separate entrance. I was renting it out for $1,500 a month. You know, they were paying, you know, not half, but close to it. You know, for a little while. And once my third child was born, my wife was pregnant. I was like, hey man, I'm sorry. You gotta get in.
I need that
bedroom. Yeah, but it helped, man. You know, it helped out. Think about it: $1,500 a month for a year, $18,000. You know what I mean? Like, extra awesome. that you kept in your pocket. So that's one way to combat things. You know, that's probably the most common way people do it these days. Is, you know, they'll find something with like a little legal side apartment where.
I wish my wife let us do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody.
Well, and just on that same topic or that same vein, like, house prices are extremely high, and I think all of us have seen it. And then interest rates are also incredibly high. Does it make sense to buy? And this is just a general question from like a finance standpoint. So, Joe, I don't know if you have the answer. Or Sergio, you got the answer. But essentially, the question is like, does it make sense to wait till the interest rates are a bit lower and maybe buy a house a bit higher from like a finance perspective, or does it make sense to buy high now, get the house a little bit cheaper, like you said, and then refinance later when the interest rates drop, if they do ever drop, or does it make sense to hold out for the interest rates to drop lower and then buy the house maybe a little bit higher price?
Salesy and cliche, and trying to push people into it. But I'll give you COVID as an example. So, I don't think in our lifetime we'll ever see it be that extreme, but you never know. But if you see a list, I would see lists, and even Joe could attest to this. Like you would go to an open house, right? And the asking price was, let's say, $450 at the time, right? Yeah. But because the rates were so low, that it makes it that much affordable for people. So you've seen people freaking paying even $100,000 more than asking. It was fucking insane, dude. Like I couldn't believe what I was watching. Like lines out the door. So like right now, it sounds crazy. It's a little easier to get a house because, first of all, you're not going to have the tire kickers and neighbors in the house just wasting time being nosy. You know what I'm saying? And then secondly, it's more serious buyers. Like if people are going to see that house, they've come to grips with, you know what, I'm going to pay $4,500, but I don't want to rent for $3,500. I'm going to pay $1,000 extra, and that's what I tell people. That some people are like, oh yeah, but that's still $1,000 cheaper. And I'm like, all right, let me ask you a question. How much money you got to save right now? Oh, I got 50 grand. How long did it take you to save that 50 grand? Oh yeah, 10 years. It took me a while. Okay, so your house can gain 50 grand in 1 year. Like you're sitting here bitching about freaking the payment or rates or this and that. Like, in a couple years, your house is going to be worth 100 grand higher in New York. So obviously everywhere is different, but I live in New York. So, you're going to wind up paying that much more for that house, man. So why not just do it now if it fits your budget? And if it's a hell of a lot easier and you don't have to give away your firstborn child to get that freaking accepted offer. Like I'm telling you, people waive appraisals and crazy shit. I'm like, why would you waive appraisal? I mean, look, if it's a brand new house, okay, but most houses are not brand new, right?
I wouldn't waive an appraisal 50, 60, on a new
70 years old.
That's a different topic, but
like you can't see through walls.
I'm in the construction industry, so new builds, man, get your shit appraised, inspected again. That's wild, man. No, I remember that. Like there were a lot of listings that basically said they weren't going to wait for you to have the home inspected and think. I mean, that's how quick you had to move to snag a home during all that. I don't know what period of time. That was just a blur of my life. But yeah, dude, it's wild, man. And that's what he and his wife got caught up in. I mean, and they just got emotional and they started looking at that top dollar and not really paying attention to the interest rate and kind of balancing the two to say, wait, this is still like really a good deal. He's lucky because I'm like, man, like how are you affording rent? And they have a landlord.
To the rate.
Yeah.
You're married to the house. That's what I tell people.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the beauty of it, right, is if you get a higher interest rate, but the house price is where you want it, hopefully rates will go down at some point and you can refinance.
Exactly.
So
that's what I'm saying. You're not married to the rate, man. You're married to the house. So, you buy now and rates are in the sixes and, the payment's going to be a little higher, but it's still better than renting. And if you make the money, do it. And You could always refinance down the line, save yourself 500, 600, 700 bucks a month, depending on how low the rates go. I mean, I just helped a woman refinance. FHA Streamline. She was at she closed at 7.375. It was like a little over a year ago, and I just helped her get a 6.25. She saved $425 a month.
Yeah, that's
She
a
was
huge
like,
chunk of change.
"Ooh, swish!" Yeah, and it was a streamline, dude. She didn't need an appraisal. She a month off on her. That helped her free up some money.
Yeah, I was gonna say
there.
the clock resets
Payments
on
like-
that first payment, right? Yeah.
Yep.
A little bonus.
On a streamline, normally they only skip one. On a regular refi, a lot of times I could get them to skip 2 months. So I mean, look, if your payment's $5,000 a month and I get you 2 months off,
Yeah.
$10,000 you just pocket it there. So you got to look at everything, man.
It's
so
a year,
yeah, for
it's
sure.
It's semester, if not a year of college, right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about you. You mentioned this, and I don't know if I fully understood it when you were talking with Joe and I, but I think you said it's a fairly new trend or a new thing where people are catching on that the seller is not obligated to pay the buyer's agent fee. I think we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, real estate law. Yeah,
that's huge right now, man. That's huge. Yeah, so look, I mean, it sounds like kind of like a dick thing to say, but
It
we
does.
need to get rid of a lot of these agents anyway, man. We had to get rid of some of these agents somehow, and I think it was actually a good strategy because, when rates are low, you could be freaking half near brain dead and sell a house. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
you had a real estate license, dude. Like,
you're just a warm body that shows up and collects checks.
Exactly. I mean, you had every Tom, Dick, and Harry freaking getting a license and posting online. Oh, look at me, like showing off. And I'm like,
yeah, agent of
there's
the
like
year.
crickets now. I'm like, where are all these people at that were rock stars freaking selling all these houses?
Yeah, now they got to work for it now.
Yeah, it eliminated a lot of people because, not only did the higher rates eliminate people, but now it's like they weeded up, all of these half-ass agents that came in that, never even knew what the hell they were talking about with selling houses. But, as of August of last year, the buyer, the seller, and the listing agent no longer have to pay and split the commissions with the buyer's agent. It used to be, if the seller is getting charged 6% from the listing agent would break off either 1% or 2% of their commission and give it to the buyer's agent. Don't get me wrong, the buyer's agent is definitely needed. I mean, a listing agent can't do both. And some of them are still paying. Some of them, because they realize, they can't do both. How are you going to do open houses and showings and now you got to deal with buyers too that need to be driven around and showing 10 houses, and it's impossible for them to do it unless they have an assistant, and some of them are finding ways, but now it makes it so that you really got to know what you're talking about and have negotiating skills and really be seasoned, or at least educate yourself so that you know what the hell you're talking about, and a lot of agents are struggling, man, because, first of all, now not only do they have to come up with down payment, closing costs, but now they got to factor the 1 or 2% that their buyer's agent's charging them, and a lot of people struggle with that, with trying to negotiate. I deal with agents that really know what they're doing. My guy Mike Seward, I do a lot of business with him. He never has an issue with that, and
I've seen a lot of agents just the last few years. They kind of all got into it like 4 years ago when everything, because like you said, and they're all out of the business now. And it's crazy. I saw a statistic I think the other day, and it was like only 1% of real estate agents that have a license sell more than one home a year.
Jesus.
Wow. That's wild.
It used to be like 20.
Yeah, but it's crazy because you right, like when you hear real estate, like most real, and they're always posting, right? But I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people that get the license, don't do anything with it. They just thought it was cool to help a family friend here and there. Um, but when there's so many agents and it's saturated, there's only so many homes that are getting sold, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of times it might be somebody buying the same, right? You might buy 3 or 4 houses yourself, and you're going to use the same agent, not go to somebody else type thing if they did well. It was just a crazy statistic because you see people all the time like, oh, real estate, it's the greatest industry to be in. And it's like, yeah, but 1% do more.
It's true.
It's great. But I think that's HGTV has really put a.
Oh my God, the home flipping channels. You got
that.
everybody wanting to be an investor these days.
Dude.
I watched Fix and Flip on TV, and now I want to be an investor. I'm like, just stop.
They make it look easy. They make it look easy.
Exactly. It's true.
Well, it's easier for them because they just walk away.
Well, on that same topic, like I'm just curious. Like we've talked about closing a bit, and I'm just genuinely curious on your thoughts here on this. Is like, so for me as the military like veteran, like I have zero down and stuff like that, but I still have closing costs. But like,
military,
I hear sometimes about zero closing. Is that legit, or is that like kind of like more like a scam?
I mean, for the most part, it's really just a marketing thing to get people's foot in the door. You know what I'm saying? From what I saw. I mean, look, there are some like nonprofit places and, certain programs I've seen that truly there are no closing costs, but it comes with a price. Like it's usually built into the rate or, something like that. Like, let's say the going rate 6.5, right? I'm going to use that as an example. And they're saying no closing costs, right? So usually the way it works is the higher you sell in rate, you get a lender credit for that. So if the going rate's 6.5 and you give someone, let's say 7%, so now the bank is getting the customer a 2% lender credit. Plus the $600,000, you just got the down payment. So let's say, $550 is the loan amount. Now you got them an $11,000 credit, so if their closing cost, let's say are $15,000, now they're paying $3,500 or whatever it is, $4,500 in closing costs. Usually there's something about it, and it's usually, like I said, a marketing thing. I see that very common with builders and, with new construction. So the best example I give people is a jewelry store, right? And, you see a diamond ring, you try to buy your wife or whatever it is. And, let's say the ring is priced out at $10,000 and they're like, yeah, it's 60% off. And they say the original price was $15,000.
Yeah.
It's bullshit because they're just telling you the price was higher, right? And they're giving you a percentage off. That's what a lot of new construction people do. They, new builders on new construction, they'll give these crazy credits, but like their closing costs are like double what you normally see out there. So then they're like, yeah, but we're giving a $10,000 credit. I'm like, my closing costs are cheaper without that credit. What the hell what are you talking about here? Like, and people get swindled into it. It's insane. It's insane. I see it all the time. They're like, yeah, but I'm getting this credit. I'm like, yeah, but your closing costs are literally like double what they should be, So that credit is bullshit if you really think about it, It happens all the time. And it's the same thing with grants. There's a lot of people that they go for these grants. And I don't try to sound negative to people, but I'm like, listen, if it was that easy, everybody would get a grant and get free money, right? Yeah. So, sometimes it works out, but most of the time the grants are more geared towards like, a young couple that they're buying a 2-bedroom condo, because there's a lot of income limitations on them and restrictions and, and ultimately some of them bump the rate up so that it's not free money. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen that plenty of times where that grant company is actually profiting because you're paying a full percent normal rate. So that, how do you think they're getting their money back? You know, it's just like the free closing cost thing. There's always, some kind of way that they're making their money. It really is.
At the end of the day, the profit's similar for the bank. Either way, they run something. It's just
banks are in business to make money.
So it's not legitimate as zero closing. It's just shifting where it's coming from.
Correct.
It's which cup is the ball like under?
I'm like, banks are in business to make money. What? How would they make money if there's zero closing costs and everybody's getting free loans? Like, can you show me this bank so I can try to get a freaking house? Like, I call it fantasy funding when they tell me that. I'm like, did you call fantasy funding?
Yeah. That's funny.
So
that's one of my favorite lines, fantasy funding, because I hear that all the time with people with zero closing costs. I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. Call me back when you you find out it's bullshit.
Well, and I'm not meaning to ask too many questions here, but you mentioned before about the new builders and wanting to do that kinds of stuff, and how they'll sneak certain closing costs into certain other areas and things like that. But one of the other topics we talked about earlier that I was curious about is like appraisals, and more specifically, like, is it a necessity? I know we talked about it a little bit, but like, so for instance, for me, I have to get an appraisal for a VA loan. It's a requirement in order for me to purchase a house. Which is one of those nuances we have to go through. Is the appraisal worth it? Is it recommended? I mean, how many homes have or purchased or seen that appraisal was the greatest thing you've ever seen, and when it was like, I could have gone without it?
Yeah, so I mean, and that's another good question, but I always recommend getting an appraisal done because unless you type with an agent, a realtor, and they'll tell you, and comp it out and kind of really check the comparables and see if it's worth that and stuff like that. But you more see appraisal waivers on like refinances and things like that. You don't see them too common on purchases unless somebody's putting a significant amount of money down on the house, because it's not just to protect the borrower, it's to protect the bank, because banks don't want to lend more money than the house is worth or a higher percentage than they're supposed to, so it's got to be like where, somebody's putting like 40% down on the house. Sometimes you get it with 20, but it's very rare, but you see that more on refinances, where, if someone bought a house for 400 and now there's not a house in the area selling less than 6 and they owe 350 on it and they're just looking to save money. They're not even taking cash out of the house. Let's say they're just trying to drop their payment. They'll waive the appraisal if it's a clean deal, if they got good credit and, nice equity in the home, stuff like that. But you don't see it too common on purchases. You really
like on a new purchase. I mean, realistically, like, what's the average appraisal cost? I mean, I don't know what it is now.
600 now.
600. Like, so if you're buying a house for $600,000, are you really going to risk for $600 to not?
Yeah.
Like if one thing is wrong, you're looking at $6,000 fix.
Dude,
right? Like if anything is wrong in a house, it's like if you're a homeowner, right? Everybody here is a homeowner, right? Like one thing breaks, it's a few grand. It's never $300.
Yeah,
$400. So
it's $300 for them to come to your house.
Yeah. So if you're going to spend $100,000 on a down payment and you're going to pay all this other crap, are you really going to skimp out on? Realistically, I mean, in New York, you have to pay a real estate lawyer, right? You don't have to do it elsewhere. I don't think, but
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't think you need a real estate lawyer everywhere, right? And then you're supposed to
you're right.
title people, all this stuff.
Oh my God, you got tipping? I don't know anything about tipping.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, certain states don't require attorneys. I think Connecticut's like that.
Georgia doesn't.
PA might be like that. I'm licensed in a decent amount of states, but there's a couple in our tri-state area that you don't need an attorney. I think Connecticut.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it is actually one. That's where we have some of the rental properties. Yeah.
Side topic though, I'm a big proponent of hiring a reputable inspector to look at your home. I think a lot of people overlook that, and they just kind of look at it as a what's the phrase I'm looking. They just look at it as part of the process and something they just need to do, and they hire Joe Schmo's home inspection for $150. He doesn't look as shit. And then they move in.
It's
and
gotta be Joe Schmo. Why can't it be Bob Schmo?
All right, Bob Schmo. Sorry.
Oh man, that actually happened.
But
that happened to me. I
Will and Bill.
Yeah, come on,
okay, we can
that's
go
it.
anyway.
Nick the Dick over here. Yeah, I did. It's Was it Joe? Mm.
Mhm.
me like freaking the boiler.
Come on, man.
Well, and so it's the same thing with like the VA. Like I'm subject to having like forced to have an inspector come out, but it's not my choice. It's the VA's choice.
VA.
Who
Yeah,
the
that's
inspector is that comes out.
That's similar to FHA, right? Government backed.
Yeah, FHA and VA kind of follow the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my AC units went out 2 months after I moved in, and I'm like, and you guys didn't notice that? I mean, are we kidding?
Let's talk about the inspection.
You got to get that 1 year home warranty
what are you
built
talking
into
about?
the contract. But that sucks. But I do say get an inspection, man, because so many people are like, they're not gonna find anything. But sorry, that has nothing to do with mortgages necessarily.
I had to pay for my boiler. It was like $10,000 on a credit card because freaking I just spent damn near all my money.
Oh yeah, you guys have a lot of water heat that you use up there. That makes sense. That's crazy.
Freezing in winter.
Yeah.
And I bought my house in February, so you can only imagine. It was freezing.
Perfect time for a boiler to go out.
It wasn't like it wasn't like it was in
my
the
oil
summer.
price today.
Yeah. You know, it wasn't
oh
like
my gosh.
I was freezing my ass off in my own house. I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I have to hunt this guy down and freaking find him. Like you're paying for my boiler now, dude.
All right.
So the last thing I wanted to ask about real quick was so I using a VA loan and then hearing about other types of loans, you know, like what are the different types of loans? Because I'd love to learn more about it. Sure. I only know about the VA loan because that's what I use. And thankfully that's what's predominantly my affiliate too.
Yeah.
But what are the other like
there's a couple different types.
When does it make sense to use them?
Yeah, so you know, to be honest with you, VA is probably the best.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying it's a, you know, give you brownie points or anything, but it really is. No, it really is because there's no PMI. You know, just on the PMI alone, like if you did a loan and you compared VA to let's say conventional HA where they're paying PMI, you know, especially in Long Island, you're gonna pay like $400 cheaper a month just because of that. You know, yeah. So
what's the,
you know, you have
what's
VA,
the down payment on a VA?
You could put $0 down.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yeah, you have $0
down with no PMI, dude. It's a sick program.
Shit.
Like,
that's wild.
I wish we could get stuff like, you know.
That's why everybody wants to marry a veteran.
Yeah, right?
Amen. That is exactly why everybody wants to marry a veteran.
Like 19 years old. We got married right before they shipped out. Why? Wanted to buy a house.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that's 100%. That's 100% what it is.
What is the VA?
Yeah, you got VA, FHA, conventional. There's one called USDA. USDA is like, it started off as like farm, like real rural areas, you know. They actually have, excuse me, allergies are kicking my butt, but they have zero down payment as well, USDA, but they're super income limited. And again, it started off in like rural areas. Now they're getting a little more into the suburbs, but not really. There's actually a tool that you Google online, and it'll tell you if the area you're looking in is USDA. So like in Long Island, you usually only see them really out east, like really far out east, where there's like you start seeing cows and shit and horses, and that's when
there's cows in
that's
Long
when-
Island. Damn,
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
There is.
I didn't know that.
There is. Yeah, you
just
go
gotta go
further
near the
out east, dude.
Hamptons.
Yep, you start seeing them.
Nice.
But you know, USDA is very income limited, and they're more for like low income housing. Like if you make too much money, they don't. It's kind of weird because you would think for a loan, if you make a lot of money, it helps you, right? But for USDA, they don't want to do it unless you make under a certain amount, and it's usually pretty hard to qualify someone with that threshold. Like, you know, I think Long Island is like 75 or something like that. It's like, who the hell qualifies for a house with 75,000 a year in Long Island? You know, it's like you're making damn near what the payment is.
Yeah.
You know, if you really think about it. But you know, out east they're cheaper. You know what I mean? Like the further out east, the further from the city, the houses are cheaper. So sometimes they can qualify, but it does make it very difficult to qualify with the income limits, for sure. And then no conventional. Everybody knows conventional is like regular cookie cutter type of deal. You know, if you got good credit, you know, now that they're doing lower down payments, you know, there's a 3% option, there's a 5% option.
3% on conventional now?
Yeah.
Wow.
They actually changed their limits on a multifamily. It used to be 15% down minimum, and now they do have a 5%. It's really hard to qualify them now. I get it all the time. People trying to do 5% down on a 2-family, and it's like shut down. You know, you have to have really sick credit. You know, your debt to income has to be super low. You know, stuff like that. But
like a poster
and then
child of
FHA,
good credit to get it.
Yeah, that's what I do with my kid, man. I put him as an authorized user on both my credit cards. So, you know, by the time he's ready to buy anything, he's gonna have, you know, good credit. I wish I had that luxury when I was his age.
Nice.
Pretty sure we all wish we had that.
Yeah.
As the generations go, we're supposed to get smarter, right? And you know, get more
ChatGPT
savvy
is
with
putting a
things.
dent in that.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Hopefully, my dad's not watching.
Well, I got one last question, and then I think we're gonna wrap up. But so when I bought my first house, which was during the first like housing market crash, when was that? 2008, 2010, somewhere around there.
Smart man.
But I got an FHA loan because I didn't have shit in savings, but I wanted a house. I wanted to be able to put some sweat equity in it, sell it. But I obviously had PMI with the FHA. And when I purchased, once I hit a certain loan to value, LTV, I was allowed to basically request an evaluation of the account and they could remove the PMI. But I've seen some mixed information as to whether or not now the PMI stayed the life of the loan or whether there was still an option to remove it for FHA or certain loan types that have it. And I didn't know if that is the case or if you're just stuck with it. Because it can be a significant chunk of change, right? As part of your mortgage payment.
Just explain LTV to our listeners is loan to value, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So basically what your house is worth.
LTV, it's a great channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know. And DTI, debt to income. But no, you're pretty spot on. But a lot of bankers, they don't explain this to people buying houses. They just kind of just give them the rate, give them the down payment, and yeah, you're gonna pay PMI. You got to pay down 20%, but they don't get into the nuances and all the details about it. And basically, if you put down 3.5%, that PMI is never coming off.
Okay.
If you put the minimum down on the house, that PMI is never coming off. It's there for 30 years.
Never, regardless of what the house value. You have to can you refinance and get out?
Yes.
Off of it?
That's the only way to get rid of it on a 3.5% down. Now, it does get lower. I'm not going to say it doesn't drop because it's based on, the balance, right? Like
they're covering your risk. Yeah.
so if you took like it is a percentage. So if you took, I think it's like 0.8%, right, and multiplied that by the loan amount divided by 12, that gives you what the PMI is, right?
Mhm.
So as you pay it down and the years go by, it starts becoming less because the balance is less. You know what
So
I'm
there's
saying?
a separate
So the
like
PMI
amortization rate that affects the
Yeah, so
PMI.
exactly. So if you started off at 400,000 and now you're at 200, you're going to be paying damn near half of what it was, from the beginning.
Okay.
Because again, it's a percentage of the loan amount. So now if you put 5% down, it's there for 10 years.
Okay.
10 or 11 years. I think it's 10. But anyhow, and the thing that kind of stinks about FHA is one of their caveats is they don't care. Like they don't give a shit if the house, if you bought it at 400,000 and the house is worth $1 million now, they don't care.
Yeah. Right.
The conventional, you could get an appraisal and they'll send somebody to the house. If they see that the equity's there, they'll remove it, right?
Mhm.
Because you're paying down the balance, the value's going up. Conventional will consider the higher value. FHA doesn't care. They have a set number from the beginning. If you, easy example, you bought a house for 100 grand, right? Every 1% is $1,000. The reason they go off 10 years is because they feel that's how long it's going to take for you to gain that 20%.
Yeah.
Because, Joe was talking about earlier too, that, in the beginning, you pay mostly towards interest. You know what I'm saying? So they know that. So it's going to take damn near 10 years,
Mhm.
or if not more, before you're at that 20% mark off the original value.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what FHA does. So the only, and then look, I tell people FHA still, it's a great loan, especially for first time home buyers, because they're a lot more lenient on credit score,
Yeah.
your debt to income ratio. So a lot of people, it's a big misconception. They think that FHA is a first time home buyer program. It's not. You could have 10 houses throughout the course of your life through FHA, but it's because they're more lenient on credit.
Does it have to be
things like-
primary residence though?
It does.
Okay. Yeah.
It does.
So I knew there was a weird
A lot of
caveat
people-
about it.
Yeah, they try to change. A lot of people try to, cheat the system and say they're primaries when they're not, but they're onto that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah. So,
but PMI is basically to easily describe it. Yeah, it does not go towards the balance of your loan. It's money you are paying the bank to back you for such a low down payment.
Actually keep it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you see PMI, it's just know that's what Jason would call fairy money. It's just going nowhere. It's not paying. It's not paying down your loan. Yeah, that's going straight to the bank.
Yeah. So I got a customer right now. I'm refinancing. She bought the house 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, right? And the house gained a lot of value in 2 years, right? She put down 10% originally, so she only needed another 10 before she got rid of the PMI. And so she's definitely higher now versus when she bought the house. It's like 1% higher. It's not a ton higher, but it is higher. She's saving like $150 a month, right? And everybody's like, she was telling me, she's like, oh, that doesn't sound really beneficial, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, right now, you're paying, because it's a big loan. She bought, it was like 800 grand.
Only 2 years. That's not bad at all. Like you only added 2 years of interest.
And that's the thing. Like, so now that she's not paying it was like $550 a month in PMI. So I'm like, that's like damn near $7,000 that's going towards your loan that wasn't before. So you may look at it like you're only saving 150. The 150 you're saving is just like the little sprinkles on top, like that. That just makes it better. I'm like, even if your payment stayed the same and you were applying an extra $6,000 a year towards the balance of your house, I mean, just do the math. In 10 years, that's $60,000. Less that you're gonna go that you pretty much just pissed away paying in PMI. So Look, it's not like it's a bad thing because most first-time home buyers do pay PMI.
Right. Well, it
Not
helps you get into the market, right? If
not
everybody's
everybody has
tight on
rich parents.
savings right now. So
not everybody has wealthy parents that could give them 20% down, and or
make sure you
most
deposit
first-time
it in time.
Yeah.
or as a VA and doesn't get PMI.
God damn, 0% down. Holy shit! I knew it was a deal. I didn't know it was zero down.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a
great.
good deal. I will
That's
tell
good,
you,
man.
like we snuck into our house, and it was probably one of the greatest deals ever because it was a private party. We didn't have any realtors, and it was one of the greatest deals I've ever come across. It was
Dude.
20,000 under market value. We didn't have to pay closing costs
Nice.
or any of that other stuff.
Listen, I don't care.
that does happen.
You freaking deserve it. You serve our country.
Yeah.
You should be getting 10 times more shit. So
You're right.
I know.
You're
Listen,
right.
that's my honest opinion. You really
I
should.
appreciate it.
There's so many things that I think that veterans don't get, and they should. I mean, we haven't seen much in the last few years in America.
I love, dude, the little perks like give me a glimmer of hope that our government is taking care of these guys, man. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
So
It's true. I say that all the time. I'm like, they risk their lives for us. The least we could do is give them more favorable loan terms. Like, come on. You know what I mean?
It doesn't affect
Yeah,
you.
well,
more
Shit with the
favorable
bank. I don't
loan
give a
terms.
crap about the bank.
yeah, no, not at all.
I love it.
Nick's looking for a sugar mama right now that's a veteran. He's like, yo, shout out to all the veterans out there.
Trying to get a home loan.
Listen,
Yo, Sego is going on now.
those things in health insurance.
Every
is
single
why,
dad watching this episode, that's like
what was that movie?
now in their dating profile, like dating military women only. Yeah.
What was the movie Chuck and Larry, right? It was Adam
Chuck and Larry,
and the whole reason they would get married for benefits and stuff. But I joke with a buddy of mine all the time because him and his wife are both cops. And I say, dude, like, if you just like your wife could marry my wife, you and I get married, I get your health insurance, my wife gets, I'll pay you $5,000 a year.
We'll work it out.
I'll pay you $5,000 a year, but now I get your benefits. We both win, and I get free health care when you guys retire. And for the rest
Win-win.
Like, it's brilliant to me. You make a ton of money. I save a ton of money. We're both happy. All four of us are happy. Hopefully.
Nice.
They're like, no, but at the wedding, you need a 5-second Frencher. Nah.
That's where Joe draws the line. He's like, nah.
Might be
We gotta
worth
make
it.
sure you're
Might be
serious,
worth it.
Joe.
All right, guys. Sergio, my man, thank you. Yeah, no, dude, I'm not kicking you out, but we try to stay about an hour or less. We're at like an hour and 14 minutes, man. Thank you for hopping on here, dude. I'm glad you came on. You answered. I think you answered a lot of questions for a lot of dads. It's I wish Jason was on because Jason just thinks money and investments and all that shit is just fake and fairy dust. It would have been funny. But no, dude, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with all the dads out there. And I'm happy to have you on for another episode because I feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg as far as the knowledge you can share, man. So
yeah, man.
We appreciate you joining us. I
appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah. We'll link your company and info when I release this episode. Everybody go check them out. And thank you guys for hanging out on Time to Dad. Like and subscribe. Join us in the Facebook group, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, man.
Take care.
Thank you.